Hello, I'm Doug Musio. This is City Talk. Does your retirement nest egg look like Humpty Dumpty after the fall? Worried that you'll outlive your savings? That your 401k is really a 201k? That the U.S. economy is in the tank and it will stay there? That the dollar is in danger and inflation looming? Joining me today to talk about retirement, the current and future state of the U.S. economy, Wall Street, and a lot more is Mr. Roger W. Ferguson, Jr., the President and CEO of TIAA-CREF. Before joining TIAA in April 2008, Mr. Ferguson was a member of the Executive Committee and Chairman of Swiss Re America Holding Corporation, a financial services firm. Mr. Ferguson earlier served as Vice Chairman of the Board of Governors of the U.S. Federal Reserve System and led the Federal Reserve's immediate response to the terrorist attack on September 11th. He currently is a member of President Obama's Economic Recovery Advisory Board, as well as serving on the Board of Trustees for the Institute of Advanced Studies and the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and a lot more. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Nice resume, by the way.
Thank you.
So you come on the job in April 2008, and 5 months later, the economy tanks. How did you, the company, TIA, respond to this tsunami?
Well, we responded by doing what we always do, which is thinking about the long-term interest of our participants. We were always fully invested, which means that our assets went down, and now obviously they're coming back up. But more importantly, we said, what do our participants need to know? And so we responded by picking up the phone, keeping our offices open late, returning every call, reaching out, and basically trying to create a sense of reality, but a sense of comfort for the 3.5 million Americans that we serve in 15,000 institutions around this country.
And I'm one of those 3 million people who are one of those 15,000. And when I looked at my statement in December, I said, oh, God, but I didn't look. And then I looked in my September one, my most recent one, and I said, wow, what's going on here? What went on?
Right. You had the experience that many of our participants had. We are always fully invested, which means your stocks and your bonds moved up and down with the market. Mm-hmm. The good news is we're always fully invested, and so we've caught this rally that's occurred over the last several months, and that's why you looked at your statement and you said, things look a little better than they did last year.
Right. Now, what about the general economy? What's your perspective? Have we turned the corner? The stock market seems to say yes, but there are a lot of counter indicators out there. Where are we?
I think the economy has turned the corner. There's no question of that. However, it's going to be a very, very, very slow and sluggish recovery. And it's going to be a slow recovery because both households and businesses have to rebuild their balance sheets. That means that households are going to be slow to return to consumption. Banks are going to be slow to start lending again. And frankly, unfortunately, I think businesses are likely to be slow in terms of creating new jobs.
So in the short term, we've got more problems, but you're optimistic that the indicators suggest that we come out of this in some significant way.
You've got it right. In the short term, I would say we're going to feel as though it's very, very sluggish, but for sure, we're on the uptrend.
So you mentioned some of the factors involved in this troubled economy. If you had to prioritize, what is the thing that you do first? Stabilize the consumer, stabilize the banks, create jobs? I know it's inextricably intertwined, but who do you care for first?
Well, you put your finger on the main point. It is totally intertwined. We absolutely have to stabilize housing, and I think there's some signs that that's occurring. Housing was actually where this started. Once you stabilize housing, then two other things will happen. One is the banks will find that their balance sheets are being stabilized and people will be servicing their mortgages. and that will give the bank some confidence to lend. Those things are very important. Stabilizing housing will also create a more positive consumer confidence, which will give consumers not the assets that they need necessarily to start consuming again, but consumer confidence is an important element of getting this thing
also it'll
fixed.
generate jobs just simply in housing construction.
Absolutely will generate jobs in housing construction, but to be fair, as economists say, jobs and the unemployment rate are a lagging indicator. They tend to turn around more slowly than the economy overall.
What have we learned and what should we have learned from this economic crisis?
Well, we've learned a couple of things. One is your mother taught you and my mother taught me, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is
Right.
too good to be true.
Yes, thank you.
Right? So I think a lot of consumers have learned that. In my business, I hope everyone has learned the importance of really thinking about their retirement as a long-term issue, not simply chasing
And
assets.
we're going to come back to that in
That
greater
kind of
depth.
thing. People have certainly learned. I think certainly Wall Street has learned as well to be very careful about the products and services that it sells to individuals. And finally, I'd say we've learned the importance of financial literacy and good education.
Okay, let's examine all or most of those in the order that you presented. Let's start with Wall Street, though. Wall Street will be different. How different will it be? What will its share of for example, the local domestic product be? What do we see in 5 years? What are we seeing now, and what do we see in a couple of years?
We're seeing a couple of things right now, not just in New York, but nationally. We're seeing that banks are still under stress. Now, I will say in 5 years in New York and nationally, financial services will continue to be an important part of what drives the local economy and the U.S. economy. That's not going to change. I think
Is that a danger? Are we over-dependent on, both in the local economy and in the national economy, on financial services? And if we are, what's the alternative?
Well, you put your finger on it. There's no obvious alternative. So I do think in New York State, for example, we really do have to figure out how to leverage the human capital that exists here, these great universities, your university plus others, with great research capabilities. How do we turn that into new businesses? That's going to be one of the questions for New York. But having said that, New York will continue to be the financial capital of the world, and we have to embrace that and work with it.
What's your advice to investors, both institutionally and individually? Particularly, talk to me. What should I be doing?
Talking to you or people like you, I'd say a couple of things. One is hold on to your plan. The fact that the market is down and now back up shouldn't throw you off of your long-term plan. Secondly, be really aware of what your personal risk appetite is. Are you one of these people who can really tolerate the ups and downs, or should you be on a much more even keel? The third thing, obviously, we run a retirement company. Think about the 4 or 5 major principles of a good retirement system and make sure you've got those things in place. But ultimately, I say to everybody, you're going to live for another 30, 40, 50 years in some cases, longer if you're a student. Keep that long-term perspective. That's the most important advice.
What about those of us in my age range who are literally in the early post-retirement able years and have not retired and don't intend to retire? What about those of us who intended to retire or expect to retire in 3, 4, 5 years? Your advice to them is similar?
My advice to them is similar, because even if you're going to retire in 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're going to live in retirement for 20 to 30 years.
Okay.
And so whatever happens, you've got to keep a long-term perspective.
And you suggest that the key goal is to have enough money coming in that you don't outlive it.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about, you did a piece for the Huffington Post on October 1st of this year. It's titled Retirement Security Guaranteed, and you list 5 principles that a system should perform and individuals should act on.
Absolutely. There are 5 core principles to a solid retirement system. The first you put your finger on, you need to have a portion that's a guaranteed income for life that you can't outlive. The way we get that these days is through an appropriately priced, low-cost annuity. My company, TIAA-CREF, specializes in that. That's
what is
very
that?
important.
Just explain what that means.
Okay. What that means is you set aside a certain amount of your money, you give it to, let's say in my case, a TIAA-CREF,
right,
a solid, reputable company. We do the investment for you, and we guarantee you a certain income every month, every quarter,
okay,
every year for the rest of your life. Okay? Guaranteed fixed income for life. That's absolutely key.
Okay.
And you should be thinking about guaranteeing the income that you're going to need for the basics of life, right? Food and shelter. Mm-hmm. That's point one. The point two, in terms of retirement system, is it should have a limited number of choices. All the science indicates that no more than 15 to 20 investment options while you're saving for retirement. Point three is make sure you save enough for retirement. You need a retirement system that allows people to save 10 to 15% of their income for retirement. Now, that should be both what they save and their employer together. So
right,
the individuals don't have to do that.
Right.
Total contribution
right,
is very important.
Now, one of the features of this crisis is that some employers are withdrawing their payments into these. Do you, and this is a bit of a digression, we'll come back to the principles, do you see this as a significant problem? Is this isolated, is this anomalous, or is this a trend here?
I think the reality is it's too early to tell.
Okay.
Right? We know that some forms of retirement have been under stress for a long time, the so-called defined benefit plans. Whether or not the employer contributions will come back, too early to say, but I do think there's going to be some pressure to rethink retirement systems overall, and employers, I think, are going to be expected to recognize as part of their obligation to provide for a safe retirement system for their employees.
Okay, let's go through the principles and come back to just what you said, how they would go about doing that. Go ahead.
The fourth principle is to seek objective advice. We give advice in my company that is not commissioned, no commissions, totally objective. That's the kind of advice that people getting ready for retirement and in retirement should think about and seek out. And the final thing is keep an eye on the fees. Make sure that whatever you're working with is a low-cost, low-fee kind of provider. Those are some of the principles.
Well, those principles almost lead back to TIAA as a future model for this universal retirement system that you're talking about.
Doug, you couldn't have said it better. TIAA-CREF has been in existence for 90 years. Our only reason to exist is to get people safely to and through retirement. And we do think that we've got a model for what the American retirement system should look like going forward.
Okay. You've got the principles. How do you implement the principles into a practicable system, a real system, not just incoherent parts that we, euphemistically call a system?
Well, the first thing you do is you recognize that it is time to fix everything and not bits and pieces of it.
Okay, so we're doing a comprehensive.
So it's got to be comprehensive. Okay. Secondly, I think it's really got to be national, which means the U.S. government is going to have to get involved in at least articulating what these goals are. Now, the good news is that we've got a president who, in his inaugural address, talked about the need to have retirement which is dignified. So I think that at the top of the administration, there's a recognition of all of this.
Have you seen any actions that sort of demonstrate the commitment as well as recognition?
The administration has taken a couple of actions making it easier for people to save for retirement. For example, it is now possible to have your tax refund go directly into a retirement account. They've also done something else that is very important, which is to allow the possibility of an automatic enrollment in a retirement account. This question about automatic enrollment and automatic increases in savings as you go through your career is also an important subtext around all of this.
And I would think a source of political conflict.
It's actually going to be a source of political conflict. You want to stay away from mandates to make it politically viable, but you do have to give people incentives to make it politically acceptable. And so how they're going
to You have to bribe them to act rationally?
You have to encourage them to react rationally.
Okay. Set it up. What other elements are there for this?
The third element is that employers and workers have to understand they have a mutual obligation, so that's got to be articulated in the rules. We see that in the higher ed sector, right, where
Yep.
CUNY and the professors and workers are both expected to contribute.
Right.
Right. The fourth element, as I've said, is this automatic enrollment. Everyone, when they get a job, should be automatically enrolled in a retirement operation, either one that their employer sponsors or show evidence of another one. So I think there are 3 or 4 things that will turn this into something more than concepts. But we really do have to be looking for a retirement system for the 21st century.
And the key element to me, it seems, is to develop a consensus that the system not only is broken, but there are principles that can be followed that can lead to certain results. But you're going to still have political warfare, I would bet.
Well, there's no question that this crisis, I think, has not only, as you said, taken people's 401ks, turned into 201ks, and in some cases Ks, but it's also, I think, really focused on the need to repair, fix, restart the retirement system. So you do need that political consensus.
How does this retirement crisis interact with the health care crisis and the attempts to deal with it? Because, again, they seem inextricably linked to one another.
No, you've put your finger on it. They are linked, right? The biggest and most surprising expense that people have in retirement is their health care expense. Statistics show that an individual at 65 today who is retiring may need as much as $200,000 to deal with health care expense, Medicare, supplemental, and out-of-pocket. So the two things are totally inextricably tied. One of the things that younger people can do and companies can do is to provide for their younger employees the opportunity to start to have savings plans for health care in retirement, so that you're not just depending on Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera, and you're not totally dependent on reform, but you're starting to save as well.
Okay. Now, Social Security. How does the system that you envision work with Social Security? And in fact, does TIAA provide a model for something that provides Social Security but is not the current system?
Two answers to your question. The model that I've talked about should work hand in glove with Social Security. And so we think that most people should try to replace 70% of their working income when they retire.
Wow.
So annually, 70% of what you made while you were working.
And this is feasible?
This is feasible. For moderate and low-income people, you add in Social Security and your private savings to get there. For middle-income and upper-income people, it really does depend on saving all along.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that I would argue we do at TIAA-CREF, we're not a Social Security type system.
Right.
But we do have, as Social Security has, really this guaranteed income for life, call it a defined benefit type plan, in our case, in a defined contribution wrapper.
Okay. The times they are a-changing. We've got congressional hearings on financial regulatory reform. What needs to happen in terms of reform? What should happen? And what is likely to happen?
You asked exactly the right question. What should happen, in my judgment, is 3 or 4 things.
Go ahead.
First, we need a holistic reform. So if we fix anything, we should fix everything. I think we need a charter, a federal charter for insurance companies. I think we're very likely to get a consumer financial products agency at the federal level.
Wow.
That is going to be complex.
You see that as likely?
I see that as likely. The challenge will be, how does that federal consumer agency deal with the state agencies that have historically been the place that's been the focus of consumer protection? We are going to need something called a systemic regulator to look across the entire financial landscape to find potential areas of weakness. Whether or not that's going to be one institution or a group of institutions, I think is still open to debate. And I think we need to simplify and streamline the number of banking regulators that we have. So those are 4 or 5 elements. Okay,
now this, I mean, the professor's listening to this and he's saying this is really a very rational policy analysis with goals and some means to get there. Talk about its political feasibility. You've dealt in the realm of the real. How real is this?
I think all of these
And what are the dangers?
right, all of these things are real with enough time.
Okay.
So I started with the Federal Charter for Insurance. That's an idea that's been out there for some time. We need the consensus to build around that. I think some congressional leaders are certainly open to that. The consumer agency at the federal level seems to me very likely. There seems really quite a consensus. House and Senate Democrats both seem to be in favor of it. The issue obviously is how that interacts, as I said, with the states.
Yep.
Okay. The issue of having some sort of federal systemic overseer or regulator or a group that does that also seems likely. I think there the debate is it one institution? Are there many institutions? But the need, I think, is quite clear. It gets more complicated on the question of simplifying the number of bank regulators. Seems to me like a logical thing to do, but that one I think is much more of an uphill battle because each one of these regulators has someone in Congress and some private sector support.
The iron triangle works.
The iron triangle works.
Okay. Some have argued, going back to the macro economy, that we need a differentiated stimulus package, a second economic stimulus package. If that were to happen, what would be the nature of this economic stimulus package? Going back to your original comments about, looking at the consumer, the housing market, the banks, et cetera.
Well, first, I'm not sure that we need a second stimulus package.
Go ahead.
Okay. You have to understand the first stimulus package, I believe at this stage, has only put about 50% of the stimulus into the economy.
So it hasn't been injected yet.
So it hasn't been fully injected.
Let me interrupt.
Go ahead.
It hasn't been fully injected yet, but has the money that has been injected, are we doing some kind of accountability? Are we measuring results here? I mean, or do we have objective, quantifiable indicators that, this is working, or it seems to me, there's a little bit of shoveling money phenomenon here.
Well, the reality is all stimulus packages have both components to it, right? There's always a little bit of shoveling money.
Okay.
That's just the nature of the business. One of the measures that it's working is that we have avoided what could have been a much longer, much deeper crisis. And you have to give some credit to the stimulus package.
Okay.
So looking around, the evidence is it's had an impact. Can we quantify it to the dollar? Probably never.
But we can at least impressionistically see that it is working. The evidence of that being what? The stock market increase? What else?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is, in fact, in the overall measure of the economy, so the GDP measures,
Right.
they've gone from being negative to positive.
Okay.
And I think that's a sign. The reality is...
So we're moving out of recession in a technical sense?
We absolutely are moving out of recession
Okay.
in a technical
Okay.
sense. Though the banks are still in trouble, I think many of them would have been in worse trouble had we not had a stimulus package. So I think that's another sign. The reality is consumers, though they haven't really turned the corner yet, the administration is putting sort of a safety net under the unemployment level, for example. So there are a number of different impressionistic signs that the stimulus package seems to be working.
Okay. Where is TIAA? Where do you want it to be in 3 years, in 5 years, and how do you get there?
I wanted to do a number of things. First, we really have to continue to be, as we are today, the premier private sector provider of safe and secure retirements.
Just go through some of those numbers again,
Okay.
what you provide.
Here's what we provide. We work with 15,000 not-for-profit institutions. We serve 3.5 million Americans. We pay out $10 billion in retirement every year to 500,000 people. We have approximately $400 billion of assets that we manage. We've got about 7,000 employees. And we've been doing this, getting people safely to and through retirement for over 90 years, having been started by Andrew Carnegie back in 1918.
Real great social foresight. As we talked off camera, we don't have enough time here, but that really was an amazing activity.
It absolutely was, and it still is an amazing activity.
Right. So and in fact, you've come out of this. You, TIAA, have come out of this crisis as really the premier most trusted financial services firm in the country.
I appreciate your saying it.
And people are coming.
And people are
I was
coming.
looking at the facts. You've got institutions joining you. You've
Absolutely.
got tens of thousands of individuals. It must be nice to be one of those folks who can walk around with their head up in the financial services industry.
Well, I always say I'm one of the few CEOs of financial services who doesn't have to run when he sees a participant coming down the street.
Go ahead.
Well, you've made a couple of points I want to emphasize.
Go ahead.
Last year,
Absolutely.
245,000 people brought money to us for the first time. We had over 50 institutions that have been consolidating their assets with us. We've had a number that have chosen to make us the exclusive provider of retirement. And so I'm really quite proud of what we've managed to do in terms of keeping things safe and sound for our participants.
You love this.
I absolutely love it. It's the best job in the world.
Better than the Fed?
I'm very lucky because I've only had great jobs. What I love about this job is the mission, the chance to work with people like you, the chance to work with great universities and like CUNY and SUNY and others. And importantly, we're right in the middle of a public policy debate in which I think TIAA-CREF is going to be the model. We're going to be speaking out, and people are going to be turning their attention to how we have done things. And hopefully that will make, frankly, America a much better place.
Wow, this is very nice. I hope you succeed, both personally and as a citizen.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Roger
much.
Ferguson.
Thank you.
Excellent. See you next week when my guest will be John Rhea, newly named chairman of the New York City Housing Authority. Hello, I'm Doug Musio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.